the Irish Republican Army was an Irish Republican revolutionary military organisation. It was descended from the Irish Volunteers, an organisation established on November 25, 1913 that staged the Easter Rising in April 1916. In 1919, the Irish Republic that had been proclaimed during the Easter Rising was formally established by an elected assembly, and the Irish Volunteers were recognised by Dáil Éireann as its legitimate army. Thereafter, the IRA waged a guerrilla campaign against British rule in Ireland in the 1919-21 Irish War of Independence. Following the signing in 1921 of the Anglo-Irish Treaty, which ended the War of Independence, a split occurred within the IRA. Members who supported the treaty formed the nucleus of the Irish National Army founded by IRA leader Michael Collins. However, much of the IRA was opposed to the treaty. The anti-treaty IRA fought a civil war against their former comrades in 1922-23, with the intention of creating a fully independent all-Ireland republic. Having lost the civil war, this group remained in existence, with the intention of overthrowing both the Irish Free State and Northern Ireland and achieving the Irish Republic proclaimed in 1916. Emergence of the IRA after the Easter Rising. The first steps towards reorganising the defeated Irish Volunteers were taken on October 27, 1917 when a convention took place in Dublin. This convention, that subsequently became known as an IRA convention, was called to coincide with a Sinn Féin copyright-in party conference. Nearly 250 people attended the convention. Internment prevented many more from attending. In fact, the Royal Irish Constabulary estimated that 162 companies of volunteers were active in the country, although other sources suggest a higher figure of 390. The proceedings were presided over by a Permilla Món de Valera, who had been elected president of Sinn Féin Copyright in the previous day. Also on the platform were Cathal Brugha and many others who were prominent in the reorganising of the volunteers in the previous few months, many of them ex-prisoners. De Valera was elected president. A national executive was also elected, composed of provincial representatives. In addition, a number of directors were elected to head the various IRA departments. Those elected were Michael Collins, Dermot Lynch, Michael Staines, Rory O'Connor. C.N. McGarry was voted General Secretary, while Cathal Brugha was made Chairman of the Resident Executive, which in effect made him Chief of Staff. The other elected members were M. W. O'Reilly, Austin Stack, Con Collins, C.N. McEntee, Joe O'Doherty, Paul Galligan, Oina Duffy, Tsar Copyright Amos Doyle, Pedar Bracken, Larry Lardner, Dick Walsh and another member from Connacht. There were 6 co-options to make up the full number when the directors were named from within their ranks. The 6 were all Dublin men: Eamon Duggan, Gira Cubed O'Sullivan, Fintan Murphy, Dermot O'Garty, Dick McKee and Paddy Ryan. Of the 26 elected, 6 were also members of the Sinn Féin Copyright and National Executive, with a Permilla Món de Valera president of both. 11 of the 26 were elected each to Dáil in the 1918 general election and 13 in the May 1921 election. Dáil Éireann in the IRA. Sinn Féin Copyright and MPs elected in 1918 fulfilled their election promise not to take their seats in Westminster but instead set up an independent Assembly of Ireland, or Dáil Éireann, in the Irish language. On January 21, 1919, this new, unofficial parliament assembled in the Mansion House in Dublin. As its first acts, the Dáil elected a Prime Minister, Cathal Brugha, and inaugurated a ministry called the Ayari Act. In theory, the IRA was responsible to the Dáil and was the army of the Irish Republic. In practice, the Dáil had great difficulty controlling the actions of the volunteers. The new leadership of the Irish Republic worried that the IRA would not accept its authority, given that the volunteers, under their own constitution, were bound to obey their own executive and no other body. The fear was increased when, on the very day the new National Parliament was meeting, January 21, 1919, members of the IRA 3rd Tipperary Brigade led by C.N. Tracy and Dan Breen carried out the Solarhead Beg ambush and seized a quantity of gelignite, whereby 2 Royal Irish Constabulary constables were shot dead in the process. Technically, the men involved were considered to be in a serious breach of IRA discipline and were liable to be court-martialed, but it was considered more politically expedient to hold them up as examples of a rejuvenated militarism. The conflict soon escalated into guerrilla warfare by what were then known as the flying columns in remote areas. Attacks on remote Royal Irish Constabulary barracks continued throughout 1919 and 1920, forcing the police to consolidate defensively in the larger towns, effectively placing large areas of the countryside in the hands of the Republicans. Moves to make the IRA the army of the Dáil and not its rival had begun before the January attack, and was stepped up. On January 31, 1919 the IRA organ, Anglo-Irish published a list of principles agreed between 2 representatives of the Ayari Act, acting Pro-M Chair Cathal Brugha and Richard Mulcahy in the executive. It made first mention of the organisation treating the armed forces of the enemy whether soldiers or policemen exactly as a national army would treat the members of an invading army. In the statement the new relationship between the Ayari Act and the IRA was defined clearly. The government was defined as possessing the same power and authority as a normal government. It, and not the IRA, sanctions the IRA campaign. It explicitly spoke of a state of war. As part of the ongoing strategy to take control of the IRA, Brugha proposed to Dáil Éireann on August 20, 1919 that the volunteers were to be asked, at this next convention, to swear allegiance to the Dáil. He further proposed that members of the Dáil themselves should swear the same oath. On August 25 Collins wrote to the Pro-M Chair, a Permil Amon de Valera, to inform him the volunteer affair is now fixed. Though this was fixed at one level, another year passed before the volunteers took an oath of allegiance to the Irish Republic and its government. Throughout August 1920, a power struggle continued between Brugha and Collins, both cabinet ministers, over who had the greater influence. Brugha was nominally the superior as Minister for Defence, but Collins's power base came from his position as Director of Organisation of the IRA and from his membership on the Supreme Council of the IRB. De Valera resented Collins's clear power and influence, which he saw as coming more from the secretive IRB than from his position as a teacher to Dáil and minister in the Ayari Act. Brugha and de Valera both urged the IRA to undertake larger, more conventional military actions for the propaganda effect, but were ignored by Collins and Mulcahy. Brugha at one stage proposed the assassination of the entire British cabinet. This was also discounted due to its presumed negative effect on British public opinion. Moreover, many members of the Dáil, notably Arthur Griffith, did not approve of IRA violence and would have preferred a campaign of passive resistance to British rule. The Dáil belatedly accepted responsibility for IRA actions in April 1921, just 3 months before the end of the Irish War of Independence. In practice, the IRA was commanded by Collins, with Richard Mulcahy as second-in-command. These men were able to issue orders and directives to IRA guerrilla units around the country and at times to send arms and organizers to specific areas. However, because of the localized and irregular character of the war, they were only able to exert limited control over local IRA commanders such as Tom Barry, Liam Lynch and Cork and C.N. McEwen in Longford. The War of Independence. IRA campaign and organization. The IRA fought a guerrilla war against the Crown forces in Ireland from 1919 to July 1921. The most intense period of the war was from November 1920 to July 1921. The IRA campaign can broadly be split into 3 phases. The first, in 1919, involved the reorganization of the Irish Volunteers as a guerrilla army. Organizers such as Ernie O'Malley were sent around the country to set up viable guerrilla units. On paper, there were 100,000 or so volunteers enrolled after the conscription crisis of 1918. However, only about 15,000 of these participated in the guerrilla war. In 1919, Collins, the IRA's Director of Intelligence, organised the Squad, an assassination unit based in Dublin which killed police involved in intelligence work. The Irish playwright Brendan Behan's father Stephen Behan was a member of this squad. Typical of Collins's sardonic sense of humour, the squad was often referred to as his 12 Apostles. In addition, there were some arms raids on Royal Irish Constabulary barracks. By the end of 1919, 4 Dublin Metropolitan Police and 11 RIC men had been killed. The RIC abandoned most of their smaller rural barracks in late 1919. Around 400 of these were burned in a coordinated IRA operation around the country in April 1920. The second phase of the IRA campaign, roughly from January to July 1920, involved attacks on the fortified police barracks located in the towns. Between January and June 1920, 16 of these were destroyed and 29 badly damaged. Several events of late 1920 greatly escalated the conflict. Firstly, the British declared martial law in parts of the county, allowing for internment and executions of IRA men. Secondly, they deployed paramilitary forces, the Black and Tans and Auxiliary Division, and more British Army personnel into the country. Thus, the third phase of the war involved the IRA taking on a greatly expanded British force, moving away from attacking well-defended barracks and instead using ambush tactics. To this end, the IRA was reorganised into flying columns, permanent guerrilla units, usually about 20 strong, though sometimes larger. In rural areas, the flying columns usually had bases in remote mountainous areas. While most areas of the country saw some violence in 1919-1921, the brunt of the war was fought in Dublin and the southern province of Munster. In Munster, the IRA carried out a significant number of successful actions against British troops, for instance the ambushing and killing of 17 of 18 auxiliaries by Tom Barry's column at Kilmakeal in West Cork in November 1920, or Liam Lynch's men killing 13 British soldiers near Mill Street early in the next year. At the Crossbarry ambush in March 1921, 100 or so of Barry's men fought a sizable engagement with a British column of 1,200, escaping from the British encircling manoeuvre. In Dublin, the squad, and elements of the IRA Dublin Brigade were amalgamated into the Active Service Unit, under Oscar Traynor, which tried to carry out at least 3 attacks on British troops a day. Usually, these consisted of shooting or grenade attacks on British patrols. Outside Dublin and Munster, there were only isolated areas of intense activity. For instance, the County Longford IRA under C.N. McElroy carried out a number of well-planned ambushes and successfully defended the village of Ballinolly against Black and Tan reprisals in a 3-hour gun battle. In County Mayo, large-scale guerrilla action did not break out until spring 1921, when 2 British forces were ambushed at Carragh-Kennedy and Tourmakeady. Elsewhere, fighting was more sporadic and less intense. In Belfast, the war had a character all of its own. The area had a Protestant and Unionist majority and IRA actions were responded to with reprisals against the Catholic population, including killings and the burning of many homes as on Belfast's Bloody Sunday. The IRA in Belfast and the North generally, although involved in protecting the Catholic community from loyalists and state forces, undertook an arson campaign against factories and commercial premises. The violence in Belfast alone, which continued until October 1922 long after the truce in the rest of the country, claimed the lives of between 400 and 500 people. In April 1921, the IRA was again reorganized, in line with the Dáil's endorsement of its actions, along the lines of a regular army. Divisions were created based on region, with commanders being given responsibility, in theory, for large geographical areas. In practice, this had little effect on the localized nature of the guerrilla warfare. In May 1921, the IRA in Dublin attacked and burned the Custom House. The action was a serious setback as 5 members were killed and 80 captured. By the end of the war, in July 1921, the IRA was very hard-pressed by the deployment of more British troops into the most active areas and a chronic shortage of arms and ammunition. It has been estimated that the IRA had only about 3,000 rifles during the war, with a larger number of shotguns and pistols. An ambitious plan to buy arms from Italy in 1921 collapsed when the money did not reach the arms dealers. Towards the end of the war, some Thompson submachine guns were imported from the United States. However, 450 of these were intercepted by the American authorities and the remainder only reached Ireland shortly before the truce. By June 1921, Collins' assessment was that the IRA was within weeks, possibly even days, of collapse. It had few weapons or ammunition left. Moreover, almost 5,000 IRA men had been imprisoned or interned and over 500 killed. Collins and Mulcahy estimated that the number of effective guerrilla fighters was down to 2,000 to 3,000. However, in the summer of 1921, the war was abruptly ended. Violent exchange. The Irish War of Independence was a brutal and bloody affair, with violence and acts of extreme brutality on both sides. The British sent hundreds of World War I veterans to assist the RIC. The veterans at first wore a combination of dark green police uniforms and tan army uniforms, which, according to one etymology, inspired the nickname Black and Tans. The brutality of the Black and Tans is now legendary, although the most excessive repression attributed to the Crown's forces was often that of the Auxiliary Division of the Constabulary. One of the strongest critics of the Black and Tans was King George V, who in May 1921 told Lady Marjorie Greenwood that he hated the idea of the Black and Tans. The most high-profile atrocity of the war took place in Dublin in November 1920, and is still known as Bloody Sunday. In the early hours of the morning, Collins' squad killed 14 people, of whom 9 were British agents, some in front of their wives. In reprisal, that afternoon, British forces opened fire on a football crowd at Croke Park, killing 14 civilians. Towards the end of the day, 2 prominent Republicans and a friend of theirs were arrested and killed by Crown forces. The IRA was also involved in the destruction of many stately homes in Munster. These belonged to prominent loyalists who were aiding the Crown forces, and were burnt to discourage the British policy of destroying the homes of Republicans, suspected and actual. The Church of Ireland Gazette recorded numerous instances of Unionists and Loyalists being shot, burnt or forced from their homes during the early 1920s. In County Cork between 1920 and 1923, the IRA shot over 200 civilians, of whom over 70 were Protestants, 5 times the percentage of Protestants in the civilian population. This was due to the historical inclination of Protestants towards loyalty to the United Kingdom. A convention of Irish Protestant churches in Dublin in May 1922 signed a resolution placing on record that hostility to Protestants by reason of their religion has been almost, if not wholly, unknown in the 26 counties in which Protestants are in the minority. Many historic buildings in Ireland were destroyed during the war, most famously the Custom House in Dublin, which was disastrously attacked on de Valera's insistence, to the horror of the more militarily experienced Collins. As he feared, the destruction proved a Pyrrhic victory for the Republic, with so many IRA men killed or captured that the IRA in Dublin suffered a severe blow. This was also a period of social upheaval in Ireland, with frequent strikes as well as other manifestations of class conflict. In this regard, the IRA acted to a large degree as an agent of social control and stability, driven by the need to preserve cross-class unity in the national struggle, and on occasion being used to break strikes. Assessments of the effectiveness of the IRA's campaign vary. They were never in a position to engage in conventional warfare. IRA Chief of Staff Richard Mulcahy bemoaned the fact that they had not been able to drive the British out of anything bigger than a fairly good-sized police barracks. On the other hand, the guerrilla warfare of 1919-21 had made Ireland ungovernable except by military means. The political, military and financial costs of remaining in Ireland were higher than the British government was prepared to pay, and this in a sense forced them into negotiations with the Irish political leaders. According to historian Michael Hopkinson, the guerrilla warfare was often courageous and effective. Historian David Fitzpatrick observes, the guerrilla fighters were vastly outnumbered by the forces of the Crown. The success of the Irish volunteers in surviving so long is therefore noteworthy. Truce and Treaty. David Lloyd George, the British Prime Minister, at the time, found himself under increasing pressure to try to salvage something from the situation. This was a complete reversal on his earlier position. He had consistently referred to the IRA as a murder gang up until then. An unexpected olive branch came from King George V, who, in a speech in Belfast called for reconciliation on all sides, changed the mood and enabled the British and Irish Republican governments to agree to a truce. The truce was agreed on July 11, 1921. On July 8, De Valera met General Macready, the British commander-in-chief in Ireland, and agreed terms. The IRA was to retain its arms and the British Army was to remain in barracks for the duration of peace negotiations. Many IRA officers interpreted the truce only as a temporary break in fighting. They continued to recruit and train volunteers, with the result that the IRA had increased its number to over 72,000 men by early 1922. Negotiations on an Anglo-Irish Treaty took place in late 1921 in London. The Irish delegation was led by Arthur Griffith and Michael Collins. The most contentious areas of the treaty for the IRA were abolition of the Irish Republic declared in 1919, the status of the Irish Free State as a dominion in the British Commonwealth and the British retention of the so-called treaty ports on Ireland's south coast. These issues were the cause of a split in the IRA and ultimately, the Irish Civil War. Under the Government of Ireland Act 1920, Ireland was partitioned, creating Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. Under the terms of the Anglo-Irish Agreement of December 6, 1921, which ended the war, Northern Ireland was given the option of withdrawing from the new state, the Irish Free State, and remaining part of the United Kingdom. The Northern Ireland Parliament chose to do that. An Irish Boundary Commission was then set up to review the border. Irish leaders expected that it would so reduce Northern Ireland's size, by transferring nationalist areas to the Irish Free State, as to make it economically unviable. Partition was not by itself the key breaking point between pro- and anti-treaty campaigners. Both sides expected the Boundary Commission to greatly reduce Northern Ireland. Moreover, Michael Collins was planning a clandestine guerrilla campaign against the northern state using the IRA. In early 1922, he sent IRA units to the border areas and sent arms to northern units. It was only afterwards, when partition was confirmed, that a united Ireland became the preserve of anti-treaty Republicans. The IRA and the treaty. The IRA leadership was deeply divided over the decision by the Dáil to ratify the treaty. Despite the fact that Michael Collins, the de facto leader of the IRA, had negotiated the treaty, many IRA officers were against it. Of the General Headquarters staff, 9 members were in favor of the treaty while 4 opposed it. Many of the IRA rank and file were against the treaty, and in January-June 1922, their discontent developed into open defiance of the elected civilian Provisional Government of Ireland. Anti-treaty writer Dorothy McArdle has claimed that 70 to 80% of the IRA was against the treaty. Both sides agreed that the IRA's allegiance was to the Dáil of the Irish Republic, but the anti-treaty side argued that the decision of the Dáil to accept the treaty meant that the IRA no longer owed that body its allegiance. They called for the IRA to withdraw from the authority of the Dáil and to entrust the IRA executive with control over the army. On January 16, the 1st IRA Division, the 2nd Southern Division led by Ernie O'Malley, repudiated the authority of the GHQ. A month later, on February 18, Liam Ford, OC of the IRA Mid-Limerick Brigade, issued a proclamation stating that, "We no longer recognize the authority of the present head of the army, and renew our allegiance to the existing Irish Republic." This was the first unit of the IRA to break with the pro-treaty government. On March 22, Rory O'Connor held what was to become an infamous press conference and declared that the IRA would no longer obey the Dáil as it had violated its oath to uphold the Irish Republic. He went on to say that we repudiate the Dáil, we will set up an executive which will issue orders to the IRA all over the country. In reply to the question in whether this meant they intended to create a military dictatorship, O'Connor said, "You can take it that way if you like." On March 28, The IRA executive issued statements stating that Minister of Defence and the Chief of Staff no longer exercised any control over the IRA. In addition, it ordered an end to the recruitment to the new military and police forces of the provisional government. Furthermore, it instructed all IRA units to reaffirm their allegiance to the Irish Republic on April 2. The stage was set for civil war over the treaty. Civil war. The pro-treaty IRA soon became the nucleus of the new Irish National Army created by Collins and Richard Mulcahy. British pressure, and tensions between the pro- and anti-treaty factions of the IRA, led to a bloody civil war, ending in the defeat of the anti-treaty faction. On May 24, 1923, Frank Aiken, the IRA Chief of Staff, called a ceasefire. Many left political activity altogether, but a minority continued to insist that the new Irish Free State, created by the illegitimate treaty, was an illegitimate state. They asserted that their IRA army executive was the real government of a still existing Irish Republic. The IRA of the Civil War and subsequent organisations that have used the name claim lineage from that group, which is covered in full at Irish Republican Army. For information on later organisations using the name Irish Republican Army, see the table below. For a genealogy of organisations using the name IRA after 1922, see list of organisations known as the Irish Republican Army. In popular fiction. References. Bibliography, Barry, Tom. Guerrilla Days in Ireland, A Personal Account of the Anglo-Irish War. Anva Books. ISBN A9780947962340. Bartlett, Thomas. Jeffery, Keith, eds. A Military History of Ireland. Cambridge University Press. ISBN A9780521629828. Collins, M. E. Ireland, 1868 to Euro 1966, History in the Making. Dublin, The Educational Company of Ireland. ISBN A9780861673056. Coogan, Tim Pat. The IRA ISBN A000653155. Coogan, Tim Pat. Michael Collins. Hutchinson. ISBN A009174106. Coogan, Tim Pat. The Troubles. Arrow. ISBN A1570980,926. Dooley, Brian. Black and Green, The Fight for Civil Rights in Northern Ireland and Black America. London. Chicago, Pluto Press. ISBN A074531295. Durney, James. The Volunteer, Uniforms, Weapons and History of the Irish Republican Army 1913–1997. Gall House. ISBN A9780954918071. Dwyer, T. Ryle. Big Fellow, Long Fellow, A Joint Biography of Collins and de Valera. St. Martin's Press. ISBN A978-0-312-21919-2. Dwyer, T. Ryle. The Squad, and the Intelligence Operations of Michael Collins. Cork, Mercier Press. ISBN A9781856354691. Hopkinson, Michael. The Last Days of Dublin Castle, The Diaries of Mark Sturgis. Dublin, Irish Academic Press. ISBN A978-07165262261. Hopkinson, Michael. The Irish War of Independence. Montreal. Ithaca, McGill Queen's University Press. ISBN A9780773524989. Leon, FSL Ireland Since the Famine, Volume 1. Fontana Press. ISBN A97807330058. McArdle, Dorothy. The Irish Republic. Corgi. ISBN A0552078662X. Millott, Mike. Communism in Modern Ireland, The Pursuit of the Workers' Republic Since 1916. Gill and Macmillan. ISBN A9780841909700. O'Malley, Annie. On Another Man's Wound, A Personal History of Ireland's War of Independence. Boulder, Colorado. Niwot, Colorado. Roberts, Reinhardt. ISBN A9781570982774. Parkinson, Alan F. Belfast's Unholy War, The Troubles of the 1920s. Dublin, Four Courts Press. ISBN A9781851827923. Patterson, Henry. The Politics of Illusion, Republicanism and Socialism in Modern Ireland. Hutchinson Radius. ISBN A0-09-174139-4. Ryan, Meader. Liam Lynch, The Real Chief. Cork, Mercier Press. ISBN A9780853457643. Younger, Coulton. Ireland Civil War. Frederick Muller. ISBN A978-0584101379. External links